Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Vale of the Moors. The Isle of Wight had never been a place of mystery to Holly Arnold. Having grown up in the quaint town of Shanklin, she'd always been familiar with the serene beaches, the Victorian charm, and the rolling moors that stretched out like a green carpet under an ever-changing sky. But the Moors had a different reputation for the locals, a place of beauty, yes, but also of secrets, shrouded in fog and whispered about in dark corners of pubs after a pint or two. The recent disappearances had brought the Moors into sharper focus for Holly, now a detective in her early 30s. She had returned to the island after working for years in London, seeking peace. But peace had not found her. 6 people had gone missing in the last 4 months, all last seen near the moors, and Holly had been tasked with uncovering the truth. As she climbed the path towards the rolling mist, Holly glanced at the jagged horizon. The fog swirled in thick, ghostly tendrils, curling over the ground like a living thing, obscuring the boundaries of the land. It was an unsettling sight. The moors were always cloaked in mist, especially at dusk, but recently it seemed more than natural, like a veil that separated the everyday world from something far more sinister. Armed with her flashlight and a notebook filled with cryptic local lore, Holly made her way deeper into the heart of the moors. Each step felt heavier as the mist thickened, muffling her surroundings. The last known sighting of a victim, a local schoolteacher named Clara Jennings, had been not far from here. Clara had been a quiet woman, dedicated to her students, and with no reason to simply disappear. Holly knelt beside a patch of flattened grass where she found Clara's scarf. It had been missed during the initial investigation, hidden beneath a thick layer of damp bracken. The fabric was stained with something dark and earthy, almost like dried blood. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. A rustling sound came from her right, and Holly quickly turned, her flashlight beams slicing through the dense fog. For a moment she thought she saw a figure, tall, gaunt, dressed in black, but when she blinked it was gone. The wind picked up, carrying with it a faint whisper that sounded almost like a chant. Come, Holly's pulse quickened. The island had always had its share of ghost stories, but she was here to find real answers. Still, the odd occurrences were piling up. The locals spoke of ancient rituals that had taken place on the moors centuries ago, rituals to appease gods older than time itself. Holly had dismissed the stories as nothing more than folklore until now. As night fell, the temperature dropped. The moors took on a different life, the fog seeming to press in closer, the ground beneath her boots becoming softer, almost marshy. Holly glanced down and froze. At her feet, the soil seemed to bubble and pulse as though something beneath the earth was struggling to break free. Instinctively, she stepped back, but it was too late. The ground split open, and a skeletal hand clawed its way to the surface, covered in muck and algae. Holly gasped, stumbling backward, her heart hammering in her chest. But the hand wasn't reaching for her, it was reaching toward the sky, as though begging for release. Suddenly, the wind picked up again, swirling around her with unnatural force. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They demand a sacrifice. She was a rational woman, not one to give in to fear easily, but the air felt thick with something ancient and malevolent. She turned to leave, but the fog had become an impenetrable wall, and the path was gone. The moors had swallowed her whole. She remembered something an old fisherman had told her just the day before, his rheumy eyes filled with the weight of knowledge he wished he didn't possess. The moors ain't what they seem, Miss Arnold. They're alive, in their own way. There's been sacrifices, old ones. You go too deep, and you won't come back. He'd spoken of an ancient cult that once worshipped a god long forgotten by most of the world. They called it the Vale of the Moors. It was said to be the boundary between the living world and the realm of the dead, a place where the veil between the two was thin enough to tear. Holly had laughed it off at the time, but now, with the wind howling in her ears and the earth itself coming alive, the words echoed in her mind. She had gone too deep. Just ahead, through the haze, Holly saw a flickering light of fire. She moved toward it, her instincts warring with her reason. The chanting grew louder, and as she drew closer, she saw them, figures draped in hooded cloaks, standing in a circle around a stone altar. They were muttering in a language she didn't recognize, their voices low and rhythmic, sending chills down her spine. On the altar lay the body of a young man, one of the missing. His face was pale, lifeless, and carved with strange symbols. Holly stumbled backward, her foot catching on her root, and she hit the ground hard. The noise drew the attention of the figures, who turned in unison to face her. "Another sacrifice has come willingly," one of them said. Holly scrambled to her feet, pulling her gun from its holster. "Stay back," she shouted. They did not flinch. The wind howled again, and the ground beneath Holly's feet began to tremble. The hooded figures resumed their chant, louder now, and she could feel the very air vibrating with their power. The earth split open again, and this time what rose from the ground was not human. A monstrous figure, covered in moss and decayed flesh, towered over them, its eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Holly fired her gun, but the bullets did nothing. The creature advanced, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. As it loomed over her, Holly realized with dawning horror what the fishermen had meant. The Moors were alive, and they were hungry. In her last moments, as the creature's shadow engulfed her, Holly understood. The veil between worlds had been torn, and the ancient gods had returned to claim what was theirs. The Moors would take her, as they had taken all the others. The creature's mouth opened impossibly wide, its rancid breath hot against Holly's face. She felt the pull of the earth beneath her, as though the Moors themselves were dragging her down to join the forgotten souls buried within. But something deep inside her fought back, an instinct for survival, honed from years on the force. She twisted sharply, rolling out of the creature's immediate grasp. Its bony fingers scraped the air where she had been just seconds before. Holly's body screamed in pain from the fall, but adrenaline kept her moving. Her gun was useless, but her mind wasn't. If there was any way out of this, she had to find it fast. The chanting of the hooded figures reached a fever pitch, and the fog swelled violently around them, thickening to the point of suffocation. Holly could hardly see more than a foot in front of her, but through the chaos she caught a glimpse of something, a structure, half hidden by the mist and overgrown with ivy. It looked ancient, far older than anything she had ever seen on the Isle of Wight. A stone archway, carved with symbols matching those etched into the body on the altar. The veil. Could it be a physical place? With no other option, Holly sprinted toward the archway, the ground shifting unnaturally beneath her feet. Every step felt as if it might give way, but she pushed through, her legs pumping harder with every breath. The hooded figures seemed almost unaware of her escape. Their focus remained on the creature and their ritual. It was as if Holly wasn't even important to them anymore, just another piece of the puzzle. She skidded to a stop in front of the archway, her eyes quickly scanning the strange glyphs. They pulsed faintly, as if alive with some dark magic. Her instinct screamed at her not to touch them, but the fog was closing in, thick as smoke. The chanting had shifted into something more guttural, more primal, and the creature's roar echoed across the moors. With no other choice, Holly reached out and pressed her hand to the cold stone. At once, a force shot through her body, like lightning surging through her veins. She gasped as her vision blurred, the world around her bending and warping as if reality itself were coming undone. She could see glimpses, flickers of another world just beyond the fog. A world of endless darkness, ancient horrors, and towering, eldritch beings that defied all understanding. They writhed and twisted in the void, vast and powerful, waiting to break through into her world. And at the center of it all was the creature, the one hunting her now, only this time it was even larger, its monstrous form stretching into the abyss, a god of the forgotten past. Holly yanked her hand back, stumbling away from the archway. But something had changed. The creature had stopped moving, its head tilted as if listening. The chanting halted as well, the hooded figures standing eerily still, their eyes turning toward her. In the sudden silence, Holly realized the arch wasn't just a door, it was a seal. The veil between walls wasn't just a metaphor, it was real, and it was fragile. "Don't you see?" one of the hooded figures rasped. The figure's face was still obscured, but their voice was oddly familiar, old, broken, and yet unmistakably human. "You've touched the seal. You've become part of it?" Holly demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "You are the last piece. The final key to open the way." The disappearances weren't random. The people taken had been chosen, each one connected to the Moors in some way. And she, the one tasked with solving the mystery, had walked straight into their trap. They needed her to finish what they'd started. "You'd know," she whispered. "I won't let you." The figure laughed, a hollow. "You have no choice." The ground beneath her feet trembled again. It began to move toward her once more, slow and deliberate. But this time there was a shift in the air, a tug at the back of her mind, as though the seal on the archway was calling to her, pulling her in. Holly's thoughts raced. She couldn't defeat the creature. She couldn't escape the Moors. But maybe, just maybe, she could stop the ritual. She turned back toward the archway, her heart pounding in her chest. The hooded figures cried out in alarm, but it was too late. Holly threw herself at the stone structure, pressing her body against the glyphs, feeling the strange, dark power surge through her once again. The veil rippled, the fog swirling violently around her. The creature let out a deafening roar, but Holly didn't flinch. She could feel the connection between the worlds, the delicate thread that held them apart. And with all her remaining strength, she reached out with her mind and willed the thread to break. A blinding light exploded from the archway, and the world around her shattered. When Holly opened her eyes, she was lying on the ground, the taste of blood in her mouth. The fog had lifted, and the Moors were silent. The hooded figures were gone. The creature was nowhere to be seen. She pushed herself to her feet, every muscle in her body aching. The archway stood before her, unchanged, but the glyphs were dark, lifeless. Whatever power had once thrummed through them was gone. The veil had been sealed, but at what cost? Holly glanced down at her hands, trembling, pale, and something strange caught her eye. A reflection, faint in a nearby puddle. Her eyes, once sharp and brown, now glowed faintly with a cold, ethereal light. Something had changed inside her. The veil may have been sealed, but it had left a mark. She wasn't the same. The Moors were quiet again, but Holly knew better. There was something ancient still lurking beneath the earth, waiting for another chance to break free. And now she was bound to it. The veil of the Moors had claimed her, body and soul, and it was only a matter of time before it called her back. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.